Hello everyone. In this session, we're going to take a look at two topics: failover clusters without network names and storage spaces. Creating a failover cluster without network names simply means that you don't have to pre-stage computer objects in Active Directory in order to be able to create the cluster. This was previously required in order to create a cluster. But if you are deploying the cluster using the method without network names, then you are able to create that cluster without pre-staging the nodes within Active Directory. If you use this deployment method, creating the failover cluster without network names, the cluster network name, also known as the administrative access point, and network names for any clustered roles with client access points are registered in the domain name system. However, no computer objects are created for the cluster in Active Directory domain services. When you have a cluster, you have to have nodes, you have to have computer objects. But if we are using this method of configuring the cluster without network names, it means that we are not creating those objects. And this not only includes the nodes, this includes the computer object itself for the cluster. To deploy this type of cluster, you're going to have to use Windows PowerShell. You cannot use Failover Cluster Manager. And to create this type of cluster, the commandlet that we're going to be using is the new cluster commandlet with the administrative access point parameter set to the value of DNS. Let's look at an example of this PowerShell command. New cluster, which is our commandlet, the cluster, name of the cluster, cluster 1, the node parameter, and if we are creating a two-node cluster, we just put the node 1, comma node 2. We give the static address. There's the no storage parameter, and we must put the administrative access point parameter. We must set that to DNS. So that example created the failover cluster from two nodes with the administrative access point of type DNS. To verify the type of administrative access point for this failover cluster, we can run the command get cluster administrative access point. So for a cluster without network names in Active Directory domain services, the expected output is DNS. You have to run it with the administrative access DNS point. Next, we want to take a look at storage spaces. Storage spaces can be performed in Failover Cluster Manager by clicking on Pools, or it can be performed in Server Manager using File and Storage Services. As we saw in a previous session when we looked at clustered shared volumes, when we are creating the storage pool or the storage services in Failover Manager, we have to add the available disk, and then we have to add the disk as a clustered shared volume. So that might be the difference between creating storage within Failover cluster manager and creating that the storage space within file and storage services. We're going to take a look at creating our storage pool, and the same method that we would have used to create that storage pool in Server 2012 R2 is the same method that we're going to use to create the storage in 2016, except that, remember, within the Failover Cluster Manager, we're going to be adding the disk as clustered shared volumes, as we saw in our video in one of our previous sessions with clustered shared volumes. Shared storage is a feature that can provide storage for your server. It gives you the same storage flexibility that you would get from a storage area network, with the exception that storage spaces will allow you to use locally attached disk. And by this I mean the type of disk that you will buy to actually put into your computer. Inexpensive disk. When you compare that with the storage area network, you will see that the storage area network is a network of storage spaces that will provide high-speed storage for your network of servers. It provides access to what we call block-level data storage, as versus the file system storage that you would normally access your data from on your computer. You can see here a picture of the storage area network where you have a number of servers. You have the storage area network here, and you have two storage arrays at the bottom. Now, storage area network typically has its own network of storage devices, and they are generally not accessible through the local area network by other devices. In contrast to that, when we use storage spaces, we can use ordinary disk that we can attach to our computer. Let's look at this example. Here we have a server. Let us say that we have 4 disks that we want to put or attach to the server. You have disk 1, or rather disk 0 first, disk 1, disk 2, and disk 3. 4 hard drives. What we want to do with those drives is to add those drives to what we call a storage pool. So instead of having access to individual disks, what we do is we actually create a pool and we add those 4 disks to the pool. Now each of the disks is 1 terabyte. So if we add all 4 disks to the storage pool, what we're going to have available for us is a 4 terabyte storage space. And then from this storage space now, we can go and we can create virtual disk, also known as logical unit numbers. The difference here between an ordinary disk and this storage pool area is that when I create the virtual disk, I'm going to be able to pull space from the other disk. So it lets me span multiple disks. For example, if I decided that my 1 terabyte was not enough for storage,
this was becoming too full. What I could do is I could create a learn logical unit number using space from the other disk. So maybe I wanted, let's say, 1500 gigabits. I already have one here, 1 terabyte, which is 1000. And what I could do when I'm creating the virtual disk is take out the 1 terabyte from here and then go to the other disk and take 500 gig, which would give me 1500 gig. So I'm able to span all the multiple disks that I have here in the storage pool. Whereas, if I didn't have a storage pool, I would only be able to use the space on this 0 if I were creating probably a volume. I won't be able to span the other volumes. The storage pool allows me to do that. Now, storage spaces have the following requirements. 2012 server or 2012 R2. If you are going to create a storage space or storage pool, you need to have at least one physical drive. If you're going to create a mirror, then you will need 2 physical drives. If you're going to create parity or resilience, you need 3 physical drives. And we are actually going to look at all of these in another lesson where we look at the different types of volumes that we can create. One thing that is really important, if you're going to be creating a storage space using the pool, any drive that you put in your server has to be raw. It has to be unpartitioned and unformatted. And in that state, you refer to that space as the primordial pool, meaning all the disks, all the raw disks, all the disks that you have added to your server that are not formatted and are not partitioned. Also, your disk must have at least 10 gigabit capacity. You can attach the disk to your computer either internally or externally. It doesn't have to be a situation where the disk has to be added internally in your computer. You can have external disks. Or you can use what we refer to as just a bunch of disk enclosure. And we look at that topic in another lesson. The following technologies are supported. You have SATA. You don't want to use it in a failover cluster. And SCSI, you also don't want to use that in a failover cluster. How do we install storage spaces? Well, you will install storage spaces on your server page using the Add Roles and Features wizard. And you will be adding what is called the File Server Service role. And you will find that service under File and iSCSI Services in the File and Storage Services role on your server. It is also possible to install the File Server role using the PowerShell command install -Windows feature, the name parameter fs-file server. Note that storage services, another role service of File and Storage Services role, is always installed by default on Windows Server 2012 and gives you a general storage management functionality needed by other roles. We now want to go to the lab where we will actually look at creating the storage space and creating pools. You will have to do this lab in your hands-on lab assignment. Your lab notes, your lab instruction notes will be available for you. So you need to pay close attention to my demonstration of creating the storage space and pool. To begin the lab, make sure to select the try scene because that's the scene that we want to look at. The first thing we're going to do is to click on Add a Term Administrator and to enter the password. I want you to look to your left here under the menu items, and you want to select the click below this highlighted type passwords. You want to select the click below that, and you're going to see your password entered. Then you want to go to click on the arrow here to move to the next screen. Now, what we want to do is to click on File and Storage Services right here to the left of your screen. Then we want to click on Storage Pools. Then we want to click on the drop-down arrow by task and select New Storage Pool. At the Before You Begin screen, you want to click on Next. To enter the name of the storage pool, you want again to move to the left and click below the highlighted type storage pool like this. Click and you will see that the name comes in. You want to then click on Next to continue. And we want here to select all of the physical disks from top to bottom that you want included in your storage pool. So we're going to click the first one, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And then we want to click on Next to continue. You confirm that the settings are correct, and then you want to click on Create. Then we want to click on Close to close the dialog box. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the virtual disk. We want to click on the drop-down arrow by task to the right of virtual disk here. So you come to task and you click on the drop-down arrow. We now want to select the storage pool by clicking on Storage Pool 1. Then we want to click on the drop-down arrow by task again and select New Virtual Disk. Click on Next to continue. On the Select Storage Pool page, you want to click on Next. To specify the virtual disk machine name, what we want to do here again for the name, and you want to do this whenever you have something to type in your lab, you want to go below Type Storage Pool and click. And you can see the virtual disk name come into the box right here by name. And then you want to click next to continue. At this point, you want to select your storage layout. You have a choice between simple, mirror, and parity. For our lab, the one that we want to select is simple. So we're going to click on simple and click on next to continue. Here we have a provisioning type to choose. We have the difference between thin and fixed. If we select thin, then the volume will use space from the storage pool as needed. You're not going to put a fixed size. As you need storage, storage will be added. The difference between that and the fixed is that you're actually going to have only the space equal to the volume size. We want to go ahead and select thin. We're now asked to specify the volume size. After we click next here, right, this is the page with the volume size, and they now asked us to select the volume size. What I want you to do here is to click inside the virtual disk box and then move over to the right, and I have to scroll down here and click below the label type 2, and we see that 2 here now is entered into the box. You want to click next to continue, and then you want to click on create. Then you want to close that virtual disk wizard. Our next task is to create a volume. So we're going to click next here. At the before you begin screen, you can see that we are at the new volume wizard, and this wizard helps us create a volume. So on this screen, you want to go ahead and click next. On the select server on this page, you can see that is already selected. So you want to click next on that page. And let's try again here. Remember, we need to have the blue prompt before we're able to click. There you go. Click next. At the specify size page, we also want to click next. On the assign to a drive letter page, we also want to leave that as it is and click next. On the select file system setting page, we want to change this file system from NTFS. So we're going to click on the down arrow by NTFS, and we're going to choose REFS, Resilient File System. Then we're going to click next to continue. For a volume label, they're asking us for a name for the volume label, and let's scroll down here on the left. And we want to enter that name by clicking on the click below type simple volume. So we click below and we see the volume name come in. We have called it simple volume. We want to click next to continue, and we want to click on create to create the volume. And we see that we have successfully created the new volume wizard. For our volume has been created. This is the end of this session. Thank you for listening.